Well, thank you so much, Russell, and thank you to everybody for being here this evening. Thank you for really an extraordinary outpouring of the heart of this city. I am so humbled to be here with AJC. For many years, come to AJC events. Dean Schramm and other leaders in our city who have organized, chaired, who have served on this board. And to welcome Rick now as our leader here, who's returned with his wife, a native of Los Angeles, to lead here. Scott Edelman, all the board members of our local and national AJC. Thank you for welcoming me here tonight and giving me the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you. I was joking with Scott that most everything I was going to say and quote was just said in the last speech by Rick. I actually had Elijah Cummings in this speech. I've got the learned hand stuff in here. So I'll riff a little bit, but it is always a pleasure to be here with Mike Fuhr, with Ron Galpern, with former Supervisor Xavier Oslavsky, and I'll get to Roz Wyman in a minute too. And I want to congratulate Mark Seltzer for receiving this year's Learned Hand Award, which is a tribute to his work as a litigator, to his work for justice as a board member of Legal Aid Foundation, a supporter of the Jewish Federation, and a strong voice for justice in our courts and our community. And every day, Mark and the AJC really give meaning to the idea of that Jewish tradition that is universal in impact. That the pursuit of justice and the perfection of the world is something for all of us to engage in. And I know that this award follows in the footsteps of the namesake of tonight's award. You might have already said this in the previous part, but I want to go back to that speech in 1944, that I Am an American Day speech. That powerful moment when Learned Hand spoke to this nation and asked, what is the meaning of liberty? What is America's role in advancing justice at home and abroad? And what can and should we contribute to the cause of democracy and the cause, as he put it, of freedom from oppression, freedom from want, and the freedom to be ourselves? That last phrase always sticks with me, the freedom to be ourselves. You know, if you rewind the clock at that time of a global world war, of anxiety and existential crisis for our people, that when he summoned us to affirm a faith in a common purpose, a common conviction, and a common devotion. Back then we seemed to understand how to act on that faith. We weren't quick to it, but when we did join that war and that global fight, we grasped at that moment, on that year, our deep responsibility to use our might, militarily and later economically, and our moral example to make a difference. And by standing for what's right and just, we won a war, the most horrible war this world had ever seen. And we went about trying to sustain a peace, trying to make the world safe for democracy, open for human rights, and available for freedom for everyone. Today we may be blessed to not be at that level of conflict, while there still are, of course, horrible conflicts around the world. And that same violent campaign for the survival of entire countries and continents and people. But we again are faced, I would offer tonight, with a central question, a piercing question to each one of us. Now here's where I'm going to bring in Elijah Cummings. If we're dancing with the angels, as he used to put it, what will we say when asked what we did at this moment in our lives to stand up for those ideals that Learned Hand put forward, and that this nation, when it's been at its best, has embodied, for justice, equality, and democratic values? What did we do when white nationalism, something 5 years ago, if we were having this conversation, we would be surprised to be even saying in the present tense, and anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and racism returned to the heart of our nation and to global discourse in 2019? It's a big question for us to answer, as people, as individuals, as public servants, as lawyers, and as a community. It's almost too big to wrap our head around. And frankly, it almost puts us on the defensive, imploring us to resist instead of persist or even assist one another, calling on us to react to hate and bigotry rather than to affirm a more positive vision. There's always talk about tolerance and inclusion, which are decent words. But here in Los Angeles as mayor, I've tried to promote an even stronger word in my mind, because diversity can describe the buffet at our bar mitzvahs. It can be inclusion, a power dynamic that says I'm more powerful than you and I'm including you. But the word I prefer is that of belonging, because it puts everybody on equal standing, and it's an emotion. We come to a place like Los Angeles where we as Jews have felt and made a sense of belonging, where people from every culture can step off a plane or off a boat and be here and feel that sense of connection to both our own culture, but also to what the civic enterprise of this city and this nation are about. So I think we have to look at this question in a slightly different light, in a more direct and forward-looking way. And at the AJC, in this community that succeeded so well and achieved so much, what is our contribution going to be at this moment in the writing of this book of history? What can Jews do for America in 2019 and in 2020? What is the Jewish responsibility to American values and the rule of law? And how can we, in this moment of fear and trepidation, make true that statement of Justice Louis Brandeis that to be good Americans, we must be better Jews? Here in Los Angeles, we don't have to look very far to find examples of what that means, of how we can contribute to the strength and the growth and the progress of our society. In fact, Los Angeles is somewhat unique in that history, from the earliest days when this was just a sparsely populated pueblo. When we saw people like Isaiah Hellman, who came here as a teenager from Germany in the middle of the 19th century, instrumental in finance, public transit, infrastructure, economic development, backed the birth of institutions like USC, the LA Times, and what became Wilshire Boulevard Temple. People like Solomon Lazard, who was the first ever head of a Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce as a Jew in the 19th century. Or Bernard Cohen, who served as LA's first Jewish mayor. Zev and a few others know this. I'm actually the second Jewish mayor in Los Angeles history. The first elected Jewish mayor, but Bernard was the city council president, and when the mayor died, for 2 weeks he was our mayor. He ran. They said, uh-oh, Jews in charge. They unelected him, but he was still the mayor for 2 weeks. Or people like Joseph Newmark, who helped found the Hebrew Benevolence Society. Today, Jewish Family Services, our city's first social service organization of any kind, from any background and any faith. Now, we know in Los Angeles, anti-Semitism hasn't been absent from our city. How could we ever, as Jews, have it absent any place we've been? But we also know that Los Angeles, from its early days, was relatively much more tolerant and embracing for Jewish immigrants and families to settle, survive, and thrive. It was certainly the case for my own family. My great-grandparents, Louis and Fanny Roth, who were a tailor and dressmaker who fled the Russian Empire for Ohio before making their way here, where they started a business, raised a family, and lived the American dream. Or my mother's maternal grandparents, Louis and Julia Lifshitz, which I'm so glad were my maternal grandparents, because I don't think I would have been elected with that last name as your mayor. But it was the story of Jewish Angelenos who left pogroms and violence behind, and the Holocaust to help build Hollywood, ignite our imaginations on the big screen, and the post-war generation, survivors like Max Webb and Jonah Goldrich, and Nate Chappelle, who constructed homes and office parks, who literally built this city that we inhabit today. Or early political leaders like the great Roz Wyman. Still the youngest person ever elected to the city council as a young woman, some 5.5 decades ago, still a vital part of the AJC and civic life. You see, that's the Los Angeles I was born in, where those heroes were there, where a student activist for Russian Jews could go on and join the city council and become a great supervisor. Los Angeles, where we looked around and we could see our own reflection. And maybe it was because of that strength we also became, as we should be, comfortable. Isn't that the goal of life, to find a place where we belong and we feel comfortable? I grew up in my generation not thinking we had to worry about anti-Semitism. Sure, I was the kid with the Italian last name who was hiding in plain sight, hearing the Jewish jokes or the Mexican jokes, but they were just that. They weren't the violence that we had seen or that our parents and grandparents had experienced. That dangerous, insidious form of anti-Semitism that literally threatened our lives. And as mayor, I spent more time than any of us would like to, usually being a Jew helping others, standing in front of a mosque after an Islamic attack or Islamophobic sentiments, inside churches when they were torched. And as Jews, we always knew we had to be vigilant about our security. Just go to high holidays and any services and we see that. But I thought we were past the point where we would see premeditated massacres in our synagogues. But that reality was pierced just in the last 2 years. In Pittsburgh, in Poway, most recently in the foiled plot of a white supremacist in Colorado. And I do feel that too often we've grown maybe too complacent and too comfortable. As Jews, it's very easy for us to start saying the whole world is against us and to get into a bunker mode. And here in Los Angeles, where we have played the significant role in social and economic progress of Los Angeles and America, we do have a central place in sustaining this city as a beacon of belonging and innovation and freedom. But oftentimes, it sometimes feels like we've lost our focus. We turned our eyes away from upholding what Judge Learned Hand said about our country, what he called, quote, a standard to which the best hopes of mankind will ever turn. So in the face of this resurgent anti-Semitism, in a moment when we try to see, when some see Judaism, some political leaders as a wedge issue in a partisan way, when our loyalty is questioned based on who we vote for, when voices of friends in Israel might tell us to shut up and silence our criticisms and concerns, we have to have our courage and return to our roots and to our values, to those fundamental questions, and ask, what is our role today and what will our contribution be tomorrow? It's not just about standing up to presidents or prime ministers. It's standing up for values and who we are. You see, we don't have to fall in the trap of division and confrontation. In fact, AJC is just that. Not threading a needle, but proudly occupying the center. Not in an ideological way, but just in being the voice of all of us at our best, who can call out a friend when they say something wrong, educate an enemy when they say something that is wrong, and require all of us to have the dialogue together that is necessary if we are going to have a civil society here and throughout the world. You see, AJC, and I believe this room, stands up for a Judaism that means something, that is rooted in the deep and rich values of tzedakah and shalom, the pursuit of justice and righteousness and peace. Melanie Pell, who is here with us tonight, and I, with my Chief of Staff, Ana Guerrero, went to Israel this past summer and saw the beginnings of how we can restore our leadership today. It wasn't an easy time in Israel's history. It certainly isn't an easy time in American history. And as we talked to Israelis and Palestinians and Americans, and we asked each other about our own aspirations and our own challenges, we learned to humanize each other instead of the dehumanization that happens if we just read headlines or follow social media. On our trip, we didn't see division and fear. We saw brilliance and innovation, technological marvels and green development. I got to meet with Ethiopian Jews in Israel for the first time since I helped some of them move between the two airlifts of Operation Solomon and David in the late 1980s, and hear the triumphs, but also their struggles, where they felt that police in Israel treated them with racism that we could relate to, and tell them the lessons of what we are doing to overcome that in a city where Rodney King started some of that reflection and led to the necessary reforms that we needed. We talked with fellow mayors across Israel about shared challenges in building bridges of understanding and mutual respect in pluralistic and dynamic cities like Haifa and Tel Aviv, or Dayton and Los Angeles. And we saw what we as elected leaders and human beings have in common. That experience reminded me as an American and as a Jew that we have a unique perspective and a part in this chapter of history, and history calls us to it right now. Because we are a people of the book, connected to the law and a legal tradition founded on justice and fairness and empathy, we are a people that, despite changes in our wealth and status, we have stuck to the progressive principles, by and large, of preserving democracy, advancing human rights, and seeking common ground. And more than anything else, feeling and seeing suffering. In the old temple, when folks would go there, if everything was good in your life, you entered the temple and you walked counterclockwise. And if you had a problem, if you had lost somebody recently and were mourning, or if you had sinned, the Talmud said that you were supposed to walk clockwise. And talking to my rabbi, Sharon Brous, we were studying this one day, I asked her, she found this very obscure part of the Talmud where it's like the most boring sections of what you do and where you go. She said, why would it be that everybody walked counterclockwise in one direction, a sea of that Jewish continuity, that idea that we are one community coming around the holiest spot, and yet those who were at their worst moments were required to go the other direction? And she offered, I think, a lesson that's instructive for all of us. That at that moment when you didn't even want to go to the temple, you were demanded to go there, whether it was to mourn or to admit your fault. And the people walking counterclockwise would see that person so that they could comfort him or her. I'm sorry for your loss, the mistake that you made. I see you. And vice versa, those folks could know that they were not alone, that they would walk the other direction and see every face, because when you're walking in unison, you don't see one another. You only see the back of one person. But we could see who we are. I think that is the gift that we have as Jews, because we have been there before, that we can see the suffering of our own community and of others. We can see what happens when values are rejected and when faith and identity become weaponized against us and our families, whether that's domestically or internationally. And because we appreciate that embracing and acting on these ideals are what has protected us as a people and allowed us to lead free, prosperous, and fruitful lives of our own, it's our role and obligation, our commandment and mitzvah, to deliver that same promise to everyone who's ever been a stranger in a strange land. And who of us has not been? That's our role. That's our responsibility. To affirm our belonging and what it means to feel that you don't belong, when America needs that lesson more than ever. And to again affirm in word and deed our common faith, our common conviction, our common devotion to a healthy, diverse, and even noisy democracy that says everyone deserves equality and justice in our courtrooms, in our country. Everyone matters in the eyes of the law. Everyone belongs no matter what. That is a vision that AJC is fighting for, and that I am proud to join with AJC to fight for as well. And with lifting up voices like Marc Seltzer and each one of you who embody that each day, it gives me great hope in this city of angels, that we don't just come together in the worst moments like fires, but we come together in our most challenging moments. When the slow-burning fires that challenge our democracy and our values, we will not let advance. We will put those fires out so that we all live a better day in this city of angels and across this globe. Thank you all so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Master of Ceremonies, Stephen Slater.